on. Now, we like to change things up on JK Live, so joining me in the studio with subjects that have been winding them up today are Rebecca and Mike. Mikey, let's start with you. What you got? Because watch his face.
Well, you know Sadiq Khan and I don't exactly see eye to eye. I've asked him on my show probably about 1 million times.
Never come on.
Now they don't even bother answering the requests. But he's never going to come on. I don't expect him to. But he is often an appearance on Plank of the Week. In fact, he's come. If it wasn't for Harry and Meghan, he would have won Plank of the Year. Because the guy is a complete and utter maniac for climate change, right? He's just written a book called Breathe. Now, it's no coincidence that he wants the air to be cleaner in London at the same time as him having a book out. You know, he doesn't actually want to make the air any cleaner. He just wants to charge you for making it dirty. So if you drive a car that's a polluting car, you can still drive it, you can still choke people to death with it, as long as you pay the fee in order to let you into.
And what happens with the money from the fee? What does that go towards?
Well, that's a very good question. Nobody's very sure. But as you might expect, it's worse than that. Because inside City Hall, which has been basically moved, they had a custom-built building built just above Tower Bridge, that big globe.
Yeah.
You know, the architect was that guy Foster, who gets paid a fortune. They've now moved to Stratford. They don't even occupy that building anymore because apparently it's too expensive. But they've got something inside the London Assembly, Greater London Assembly, called the Climate Action Group. And the Climate Action Group helps people who work for Sadiq Khan to be more in touch with their climate change attitudes. Right?
What does that mean?
Well, it means that there are things that they can do. So it's basically sent out a memo to them all in the last week or so, which was picked up by The Sun on Sunday, which basically says, you know, if you want to at the weekends, you might want to become a bit of an eco-nutter, you know, you might want to go and join Extinction Rebellion, you might want to, you know, just stop oil, something you could be doing, you know, because it's important that you do something good for the climate. And they're actually saying it's not good enough just to say things, you have to actually have action.
Haven't civil servants been encouraged to check their bank's green credentials?
They've also been asked to do that. Check your bank's green credentials. The quote actually says, nobody's asking you to glue yourself to anything, but individual change isn't enough to influence the changes we need to make. Too much use of change. They could do with learning English, apart from anything else. They're also setting up climate cafes inside.
What's a climate
This is
cafe?
all at taxpayers' expense, by the way.
Yeah.
Climate cafe. I don't know what a climate cafe is. I presume it's a cafe with a climate, like every other climate
cafe. So it's
cafe.
a hot cafe or a cafe where you get wet?
Maybe you can change. I don't know if you have to change the temperature.
I'd like to get wet. Just change the dial.
Yeah, just change the dial.
Yeah.
They'll be selling more vegan meals, right? They won't be using any fossil fuels. I presume they're just not cooking anything.
Right, let's stop right there. So Sadiq Khan, Bex, right? London's suffering, right? And this idiot thinks it's a good idea. Come on, climate cafes and get your stuff. You need to go and join Extinction Rebellion. What about people in London? And by the way, if you're watching this across the United Kingdom, you might well end up with a Sadiq Khan if you're unlucky enough. The man's a maniac. Mike's right. Come on.
I think trying to make London the greenest city in the world is a really admirable legacy that he's pursuing.
But
and London might be suffering, but we're certainly suffering more if our air quality continues to diminish. And this is all about combating, and I can already hear the groans, climate anxiety, which is this very real condition. Oh, I know.
Sorry.
A very real anxiety that people feel about the kind of ever-changing climate crisis. And so these are helpful tips.
Who's anxious about the climate?
I mean, evidently not you two, but
no, are you? Are you anxious?
Of course I am. I'm terrified of what's going to happen.
Terrified?
To the planet. Yes, absolutely.
Don't look terrified. What are you terrified about?
The fact that we're not going to be able to reverse climate change, that the temperature is rising.
Could I just... Sorry.
Have you been out today?
Could we be responsible? Could I just have the camera on me? Are people all right? Are you suffering from climate anxiety? Because we want... Are you suffering
We're
from...
here for
Crew,
you.
are you all right? Are you suffering from... We're here for you. Gallery, are you all right? Are you feeling anxious because of the climate? Taking the camera out, that didn't work.
I'm anxious.
Anyway, OK, well, we're going to be totally different on that.
Yeah, we are. I can tell.
But you've brought a story. Your turn to speak. What have you got for me?
Well, the Telegraph are just obsessed, aren't they, by kind of a revisionism on lockdown. So they have got very excited about this report that's come from Johns Hopkins University and Lund University looking at the lockdown and claiming that we only managed to save 1,700 lives with the lockdown in 2020. I mean, I'm just not sure how helpful these things are. Firstly, because we're just about to go into probably a decade-long lockdown inquiry of our own to understand why the decisions were made. And also, I'm not entirely sure on the science here because all the findings are comparing our lockdown response to that of Sweden. And despite us both being European countries, there isn't really much similarity in terms of us as a country and Sweden, whether it comes to obesity rates, pre-existing conditions, intergenerational living, population...
How many times have you won the Eurovision Song Contest?
I mean, that too. EU. So just kind of comparing our response to what happened in Sweden, which was obviously a voluntary lockdown, I think is kind of slightly mute. And my concern is that, you know, if we hadn't locked down and we would have kind of let this virus run through the population, we could have seen an even greater death toll.
Can I say something? Well, can I say something? I think in years and years and years to come, everybody will say we should have done this, we shouldn't have done that. I think it's one of those horrendous moments in history that mistakes were undoubtedly made. I think that any politician, and I'm going to be absolutely honest about this, I'm not sticking up for Boris Johnson or even that idiot Matt Hancock. I think anybody would have messed up the lockdown. I think there are lessons to be learned. All I think as a human being is, please God, we don't make the same
I think that's the important
again.
thing, that there should be lessons learned. And yes,
there have to be,
it's difficult and it's always easy to look back in hindsight. However, I think what you have to put in context is the reason that the comparison with Sweden is being made is because the results, you're right, were more or less the same. But yet, Sweden didn't do all the things that we did. So the idea is basically that if we'd done nothing or done less than we did, it wouldn't have made any difference. And the reason why we know this to be true is that most of the COVID deaths were caused to people who were already pretty ill and who were already pretty old.
And we know, I mean, I told you.
But also, Neil Ferguson, the sage predictor, you know, the man who makes all the models.
Is that the one who went off to see his girlfriend?
He had his own model going on over in North London. She was German, apparently, married, open marriage, not a problem, don't mind. But anyway, in the end, right, he predicted 400,000 deaths.
I know.
And it turns out that they say it was 1,700. I think that's a big... huge, paradox.
Yeah.
OK, very quickly, paramedics urged to take police escorts to 1,200 addresses for fear of attack. Paramedics experienced violent behaviour towards them during call-outs to properties. The College of Paramedics said the figure was outrageous and called on courts to implement tougher sentences for assaults on paramedics. I talk about paramedics. I've got a couple of mates who are... Listen, I'm not talking about their wages. The way that the British public treat paramedics who put their lives on the line is disgusting. I've worked, I've done stuff. It's disgusting, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what we're talking about here are kind of very vulnerable, mentally unwell people who are keeping axes under their pillows and people who are paranoid about ambulances. And so absolutely they should be kept safe. But this is why Mark Rowley and other police officers then saying they're not going to attend instances of mental health is so terrible, because it puts at risk other public service people.
I think that's right. But the only way to really sort that out is that these people are probably not safe to be in the community. They shouldn't be in the community. They should be in some kind of institution.
I did a show with an ambulance crew with paramedics. I told you before, and we were called to the same guy who had mental health problems 5 times, kept taking it. The abuse, it was awful. I wouldn't. I mean, we've got some quick iPad comments, actually. Paramedics have a right to feel safe, says Bob, whilst performing their obligations and duties. Bryce says, in my opinion, ambulances shouldn't serve communities where their staff safety isn't assured. I agree. Deb, they have the right to be safe, but there isn't enough police to do this. Rich, instant jail for anybody messing with the emergency services will curb this problem. And Andy, if the police were doing their job in the first place, why would there be 1,200 unsafe addresses, which is the point. Final one for you both. Hake will be imported from the US. This is fish. In a 1.2 billion rescue mission to prevent half of our chippies closing by 2025. Chippies have recently been hit by soaring costs and short supplies. Chippy tea Friday.
You know what it is?
Out moist. What's happening?
It's a hake crime.
Hey! Are you a fish and chip fan?
Yeah, I love fish and
mushy peas or curry sauce on your fish?
Mushy peas.
Not curry sauce?
No.
Not curry sauce.
No.
Why not?
It's a northern thing, isn't it?
What of course it's not. You got out moist, bit of curry sauce.
Yeah, well, that's northern for me. Birmingham. That's north of...
Michael,
Sorry.
there's a lot more to this country north of Birmingham.
I know. Well, in Scotland, they like a bit of curry sauce on the chips as well. But, I mean, the thing is, it seems ridiculous. Well, I don't mind hake, but the point is, why are we importing fish when we've got loads of fish? The reason we're importing it is because the French are nicking all our fish, despite the fact that we're supposed to have left the European Union. We're letting them take all of our fish out.
They're taking our fish.
They're literally taking our fish.
They're taking our fish and leaving the migrants in the water who don't want to get on the French boats. They want to get on the British boats, and then they're nicking our fish.
Can we exchange the hake for some migrants and send them to America?
Friday was fish night in my house. Always Friday, right?
Yeah, fish on a Friday. Yep.
Fish in my school. Was fish in my school on a Friday as well.